Welcome to the Fear and Greed Business News Afternoon Report for Monday, the 19th of August, 2024. I'm Sean Aylmer. Every afternoon, we've got the 5 stories that happened today that you need to know about. Story number 1, the S&P ASX 200 closed up just a touch, 0.1% to 7,980 points today. Broadly, the utility stocks did best and the consumer staples companies worst. The big banks were all higher while the miners dropped. WiseTech Global, James Hardie and Goodman were underperformers. REA was one of the best. Story number 2, Ampol will cut back on the pace of its electric vehicle charger rollout as EV sales slow. And it's also facing challenges in its core aviation and heavy transport markets. The fuel refiner and retailer announced a 29% drop in net profit for the 6 months to the end of June and cut its dividend, sending its share price down 4.5% today. Chief Executive Matt Halliday said a challenge with rolling out new EV chargers is actually getting them connected to local distribution networks, as well as the fact that sales growth has slowed. More than 2/3 of Ampol's fuel sales are actually to aviation and heavy transport operators, and the shift to sustainable fuels is challenging for the group. Mr. Halliday praised the result in tough economic conditions, saying the resilience of Ampol's local retail earnings was particularly pleasing and had helped offset setbacks at its Lytton refinery in Brisbane and softer international sales. Story number 3, Leandlease has fallen to a $1.5 billion annual loss after taking heavy write-downs on its offshore operations, though it insists that its turnaround plan is on track. The property developer says it is on the way to selling off the bulk of its international development and building businesses and return about $4.5 billion of capital to Australia. Now, it dumped its global ambitions back in May following pressure from activist investors. Chief Executive Tony Lombardo said the company was simplifying its business and the results reflected challenging business conditions and the early actions from its refreshed strategy. He said the group's priorities are strengthening its balance sheet, returning capital to shareholders, investing in its local operations and growing its international investments platform. Leandlease's core operating profit after tax rose by 2% for the year ended June 30. The $1.5 billion loss included $1.38 billion of impairments and charges on businesses it is selling off. There was also a $500 million write-off of goodwill, primarily related to its acquisition of British building firm Bovis Construction, which is being prepared for sale. Story number 4, Team Australia, which includes the big iron ore producers and steel makers, are being hammered by enormous levels of steel being sold by Chinese steel mills into the Asian region, according to Bluescope boss Mark Vassella. Bluescope is Australia's largest steel maker, and Mr. Vassella said steel margins had been more than halved thanks to the actions of Chinese makers. He said it will hurt companies like BHP and Rio Tinto, and it isn't a great outcome for Team Australia. He was speaking after announcing a drop in net profit. Now, the collapse in steel margins combined with a housing and construction slowdown in Australia prompted the company to forecast much weaker earnings for the first half of this financial year. Bluescope's share price fell 3.4%. And finally, story number 5, yet another profit. A2 Milk Company's share price tumbled 19% today, even after it said it had won a bigger share of the lucrative Chinese infant formula market. A2 increased earnings for the last financial year by nearly 8%, but it was way below expectations, triggering the sell-off. Not helping was a disappointing outlook from the group. The infant formula company, which also sells milk, warned that the Chinese market is facing increased competition and challenging microeconomic conditions. Chief Executive David Bortolussi said that while China still had 40% of the world's infant market, despite the falling birth rate, A2 is looking to expand elsewhere and become more relevant to families over their life cycle. He was talking a lot about the US and Middle East today. On Friday, A2 settled arbitration disputes with its key supplier, Synlat, which has agreed to end an exclusivity arrangement that will allow A2 to manufacture its own infant formula. That's it for the afternoon report for Monday, the 19th of August, 2024. Don't forget to hit follow on the podcast and find Fear and Greed on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok, and Facebook. Join Michael Thompson and I tomorrow morning for the Fast 5 by Fear and Greed, the top 5 business stories you need to know in just 5 minutes. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your evening.